What's up, guys? Jason Guyman here with Christmas Lights, King of Pressure Washer. I don't know what we're going to be in here tonight, but I've got a special guest, and we are going to talk about your pitfalls that businesses have. And the thing about Paul is he has grown several businesses, does lots of money, and he has wanted to come on here so much tonight that he actually didn't go see Jordan Peterson. I know that he wanted to give you value. Actually, his wife didn't want him to go, I think, is more like it. But with that, just Paul, tell us a little bit about who are you, where are you from, and this is going to be more of a kind of a back and forth. Me and Paul's, he came to about 3 or 4 of my Christmas light training classes between some of his employees and different things, and that's how I've learned who Paul is. But he's a great business coach, he's a great business owner, and he does a whole lot of awesome stuff. So tell me just a little bit about who are you and where you're from.
Well, first to start, that is true. I was supposed to go see Jordan Peterson tonight. I had good tickets. I ended up giving them away to an employee. But when Jason Guyman asked you to get online with him, you can't. It's hard to turn that down. So no, I had a church event, so I decided to do the church event and give my tickets away to an employee. But as far as who I am, I'm just an average guy, really, when it comes down to it. I started a business 25 years ago with little to no knowledge of how to run a business. Got started, the hard way, and lo and behold, I found myself into Christmas lights about 5 years ago, and I've traveled a long way to get into the Christmas light industry. But obviously, I'm here now, and I love it. I'm here to stay. But my background started out as being a business owner in the sign business. So I was a sign manufacturer. I still am. I still have a sign business. Have 3 locations in Virginia, and we manufacture signs all over the country. So outside of that, I do have a design build landscape company. I have another lighting company. I also have a landscape lighting company, and then I have a business consulting coaching business. So I do a little bit of everything. Um, and then obviously my design build landscape, my lighting, all those companies kind of have a lot to do with each other, right? Because when you're in the lighting business, you have very similar clients, and it just kind of keeps me busy. So I've been fortunate enough that the Christmas light business just kind of goes hand in hand with the other businesses I already
Right, right. If you got one, you might as well have 10. So,
have. Well, it's like kids. I have 6 kids. After I had 3, someone said it's no different having 4 or 5 or 6. So I went ahead and had 6.
so let's get started in here. Of what made you? So you talked about all the businesses, but tell me a little bit about your story of how you got started in a business, owning your own business. Because sometimes we get started and this is where we want to do, and then we get stuck. So let's get to the first part of where did you get started in your business, or how did you get started?
So in high school and in college, I worked for a transportation company. And I also raced cars, and before that, I raced go karts. And so I was big in the racing scene, and because of that, I was always doing graphics on my car and always wrecking and having to go into the vinyl shops and ask for vinyl. And so I learned to put the vinyl on myself just to save a few bucks. And then so while I was working for this transportation company, they were hiring a company to come in and kept getting the decals on their trailers and trucks put on every summer. And so during the summers, I came up with the idea that the owner of that company had enough volume that we could do this internally. So I came up with the idea of giving myself a summer job by doing all the vinyl work. And so that led into me getting out of college, and my wife and I got married soon after college, just a couple months out. And I was doing a side hustle, doing car graphics, doing, trailer truck wraps and things like that, of that such. And next thing you know, I'm running a legitimate business, and I was too busy to continue to do my full time job, which I had at the time. I had 2 jobs actually, so I ended up quitting both of my jobs and started a legitimate business. But my wife was the breadwinner, to be honest with you. I was running the business and I was busy, but like I tell people, being busy doesn't mean you're making money. And I wasn't very productive, right? I wasn't wise with my time, did everything wrong. So that's really how it happened. It wasn't really anything that was well thought out. I didn't go to school to be in business. I never had any ambitions to really be a business owner. It just kind of all happened. And then I really enjoyed it. And then I enjoyed the industry in itself. And so that kept me in it all these years.
So the one thing that always intrigued me about Paul when I first met him is he was always like, yeah, I bought out all these other businesses that were in my same sign business area. And the reason why that is intriguing to me a lot of time is because we always worry about our competitors. I feel like one of our biggest pitfalls is we worry about our biggest competitors, and Paul never really worried about them. He just buys them out. So talk to me a little bit about that.
So if I'm being honest, I'd love to sit here and tell you I planned all that, but that was not at all part of the plan. It really wasn't even something I thought about. And there was a guy who I had. This is a funny story, but this is really how it went. So about 15 years ago, I was at a trade show in Atlantic City, and there was this particular book I wanted, and I knew this booth had this book because the author was there. He was signing the book, and there was only one book left. And I got there and I went to grab it to make sure I got that one last book. And the other guy that went to grab it grabbed it at the same time. I look up and it's this guy from Richmond, Virginia. And being from Richmond, Virginia, being from Fredericksburg, Virginia, I'm thinking, man, we're like right down the road from each other. We're in Atlantic City. What's the chances? So turned out I knew who his company was. He bought the company out 10 years prior, and we just became friends. Well, he ran on hard times about 5 years after that. And so fast forward 5 years later, he contacts me and says, man, I'm just not running a good business. I don't know how you're doing it. The economy's bad. I'm not doing well. He gave me all these excuses because I just need to come work for you. Now, keep in mind, this guy graduated from Harvard with a business degree. He was actually an executive at Capital One. The way he had the money to buy out this company in the first place was he took his buyout with Capital One and went and bought a sign company. And 10 years later, he is in financial trouble. So that's why he got in touch with me. And hey, Gabriel, how you doing? So I put myself out there a little bit because I really didn't know if I could take his business and make it any better. But I bought that his location. It was a 100-year-old company. I bought it, and within 6 months, we had turned that company into a profitable company. And so that was how the idea came to my mind of, hey, you know what? There might be some opportunities out here besides just this one situation. So since then, I've purchased 6 companies.
So talking about poor decisions for or business growth of it, what? So I've got a couple of them here. One of them's poor customer service, inefficiency operations, pricing issues, lack of marketing. And I'd like to kind of hit on a couple of these because these are all why businesses can't grow. Would you kind of, and so out of those lists, which ones would you say would be probably the biggest ones that hold businesses from growing?
All of them, right? Uh, I mean, I meet with guys all the time, and any one thing can cause a business to struggle. I think the biggest thing that I pound on with people I work with is don't become complacent. Just because you had a good year, just because last season your numbers were up or things seem to go well, don't think the same things are going to work the next season. And I would just tell you this: like, think of technology in general. Technology in general, at least in my lifetime, is ever changing. And you just think about the gaming systems that our little kids are adapting to at an early age. And, even as a teenager, I remember when some of the Nintendos and things were coming out. That kind of dates me. But, the fact is, our brains couldn't process the type of technology we're seeing today. If
You
you had
didn't have Atari and Frogger?
I did. I did have Atari and Commodore 64. It's like Mission Impossible with like a little square guy. It's strange. But anyways, if you show kids that today, their brains are like the opposite. It's like, how could you even do that? How could you even be entertained by that? But the the fact is, we are evolving, in general. And I a lot of the sign companies, just to give you an example, a lot of the sign companies that I ended up buying out were very, very successful sign companies at one time. Now, not necessarily when I bought them out, but the companies, some of I, two companies I purchased are the two oldest sign companies in Virginia, and I bought both of those companies out, being the young entrepreneur I was. But it's because both of those companies, the owners got complacent and they kept doing the things they were doing even in the 80s and in the 90s and weren't updating some of the technology that was out there. And it just amazed me when I realized they were even using the same type of softwares that people were using in the 90s and the early 2000s. And it just slowed the process down that they couldn't handle, or they couldn't keep up with the competitive edge I had. So that's kind of the biggest thing I see most with companies. They become complacent. They have a good year or two, and then they stick with that and think that's all there.
So when you bought them, I'm assuming if we talk about lack of marketing strategies, you're probably talking like they were still in the yellow pages, and they named their business A, so they showed up first. Correct?
Yeah, yeah. And to be honest, yeah, I don't know that. I couldn't even tell you if we're into yellow pages, right? Like, who who even? You remember when the yellow page guy used to come into your business and you used to be like, I have to be in there. I don't even know that I've ever, I don't even think about that anymore. And
Right.
I can remember when those days kind of started, falling, off the map as an idea in my mind. But I can also remember the days where that was like you had to be in the yellow pages.
And not only just back to that of the yellow pages, but even the technology of, since you were in a sign business, if they're not changing with going from and this is even the Christmas light business and people that do incandescents versus LED. And yes, there, even in the Christmas light business, there is still people that put up incandescent lights on people's houses. So
Yep,
I know
yep.
that sounds crazy, but there is.
Yeah, yeah, no, there is, and there's people that still have, actually, believe it or not, hundreds of clients that are doing incandescent. Just think about that from a perspective. I being in the sign business, so I would say about 2007, 2008, because someone just asked me this other day, and I was trying to date it. Somewhere around that time frame, I started incorporating LEDs into my channel letters. And I can remember the local sign shops, none of them were doing it. And my competitors, so if there was a person that was getting a competitive quote, they were like, well, this guy is quoting LEDs. You guys are quoting neon. And I remember those guys bashing our company because we were forward thinking. And the customer would come back to me and goes, yeah, we went to this other company, and honestly, you're more expensive, but we like your the thought of what you're introducing here. But just so you know, that company has nothing good to say about LEDs, and everything they're saying you're doing is wrong. And it just so happens most of those companies went out of business, or I bought them out. So that's how it went. And it's just funny because when I reflect on those days, those early days of incorporating that into my business, because I was so forward thinking, and yeah, there was some pain involved in trying to introduce something that no one else was using. I was scared to a certain degree, but I knew that's what I had to do. And to this day, I'm one of the leading companies when it comes to that technology, and the advances that I was able to streamline into my business early on allowed me to scale so much quicker because I was thinking so much further ahead.
So, one of the struggles I see a lot of people have, and this is a big struggle, and it doesn't matter what business you're in, especially in Christmas lights, pressure, it doesn't matter what business you're in, even in the sign business. I know we've had this conversation, is pricing issues. Alex Hermosi says, I like his quote of, you'll call 25 competitors and only two will answer, so you will price it at what they're pricing it, and you don't even realize that they're going out of business because they don't. And I forgot, you're actually going to do you're going to do it cheaper than what they are, and you're going to do a better job at them, but yet they're going out of business. And so I know we've talked about this. You're probably one of the highest peoples in Virginia of selling Christmas lights. But let's talk about how this can definitely be something that hurts your business growth.
When you say it hurts your business growth, what can hurt your
Like, as
business
in
growth?
not being able to price, not being able to get, not to be able to, a lot of people don't understand their own value. I guess that would be more
No,
of
no, I get it.
how do you build your value at that point?
So this can be a long-winded conversation, but I'll try to keep it short. I made the mistake, and if anyone's ever heard me speak or you've been coached by me, you probably have heard this story. But I was in Las Vegas, and I remember sitting across the table from a guy who shared instances of growth with his business, and then I was sharing my growth with my business, and then we never really compared notes until he asked me specific things like, "What are you pricing for your bucket trucks, and when you're sending out a crew, what is your minimum for a day and all that?" And we were like night and day. When I say night and day, he was twice as much as I was. And he was taken back because I had a bigger company. I was in a more lucrative area. And I remember going back home and thinking, okay, if this guy is able to do what he's doing, I've got better technology, better equipment, more business opportunities where I'm located. Why is it that I'm not charging those prices? And I realized that was all up here. It was all in my mind because I had become, the I had become complacent myself. I had thought about what everyone else in my area was charging, and I thought, okay, if I'm getting this, this, and this, then I should be good. But I didn't realize that I wasn't running a great business. And the second I introduced the higher pricing, I started making enough money that I could buy better equipment, newer equipment. I was actually getting equipment that I could now do everything in house and didn't have to outsource it. So now I was making more profit. And next thing you know, my bank account's just, you know, it's blowing up. Really, I mean, overnight it was like you hit the right stock. It was just like overnight I could see the bank account just growing and growing. And I can actually remember going out and buying, 100,000, $200,000 piece of equipment, and I was no longer having to look at a lease. I was paying cash for them, and I thought this would have never been possible had I not been able to do that. And even when these businesses became an opportunity for me when I purchased them, the reason I was able to orchestrate those deals so quickly was because I had the cash available. So all I can tell you is if you really want to scale your business, you really got to think. You can't think from the level of being an employee and making more money than you were as an hourly or salary, employee. You have to think of it from a different perspective. How am I going to scale this business? How am I going to get myself out of the trenches? How am I going to go on vacation whenever I want because I have the right people in place and I'm paying my people six figures to work for me? That's the kind of mentality you got to have. And these are the kind of things that we lack going into business ownership.
No, and I agree on this 100%. Um, and I think it's one of those things that as we grow,
My audio is going in and out. I
yeah,
just
I don't
saw
know
that.
why it's fine on my side. That's why that's weird. It's good on my side, and it sounds fine here. If anybody else has any issues, let me know. Or I know Paul or Marius, which Marius and Maddie, working fine here. Okay. Um, I grew up in the area of building a clubhouse go karts, which was a really basket we stole from the neighbor's store. I asked my mom to buy my game system, and she said, "Okay," right after I become mayor. And I want the one thing that I love about Paul is he knows how to speak in people's lives. I've seen it done it over and over and over, and it's usually young people's lives that he's been speaking into at the last probably three or four people or last three or four trainings that I've seen. But I want you to. The thing about Jamie is he's from the ghetto, and he says he's from the ghetto, and he's trying to get out of the ghetto. And this is something that he's trying to grow his business. And as we do this, what are some things that you can do that obviously pricing issues that we had talked about that, but you know how can we build value when we have a mindset of basically stealing, right? Because that's how he grew up. Not saying that that is not good, but it's how do you change that mindset from being the poor mindset to becoming successful?
Well, don't think like the poor mindset, right? Think the opposite. Um, so this is going to sound weird, but if a person gets in front of the mirror every morning and just smiles, it's easier for them to smile at other people. Do you know how many? Do you know the average person does not smile when they come in contact with people, and I'm talking customers specifically. But for example, if Jason walks up, or vice versa, I walk up to Jason's house to sell him something. Do you know how often that introduction doesn't even have a smile? Because naturally we're concerned about what that smile looks like, or naturally we've become complacent in the sense that we don't even do it. It's not natural to us anymore. But simply putting a smile on every morning can change your projection of the day. So the day might seem gloomy. You might not have a lot of things on the books, but just smile in the morning. So look at yourself and smile, and then think positively. And I'm big on positive affirmation. So the thing I would do is pump yourself up. Now, whether that be a jam or whether it be a motivational speaker, like maybe a Jordan Peterson, whoever, get something going in the morning. I do it when I'm in the shower, and I'll listen to it. And then I'm sure some of you do this. You turn it to a cold shower. It's the only thing that keeps me motivated to go cold in the shower right before I get out. So I do it every morning. I think my wife thinks I'm crazy, but she doesn't understand it. That gets me work, gets me all excited. By the time I get to work, I'm the most excited guy in the room. But it also motivates the guys that work for me. And so I would say change your perspective from the morning time on. Start a routine in the morning that changes your perspective. And then the other thing I would really pound on is I forget who did this study, but it was a university. But they did a study that most out of 100% of decisions that were made for people that bought a product or approved a sale were two reasons. The one was the personality of the individual, and that was 85% of the reason. 85% of the sales were because of the person's personality. Think about that for a minute. So if your personality is that of someone who is gloomy and thinking about all the worst things that you've been through or what your life was like before, then you're probably going to show that on the exterior. And so I would say just look at the future and look specifically at what is it that I want. I want to get myself out of this situation. I don't want my kids to grow up in this situation. And so I would think that that would be the first thing I'd focus on. The other thing was knowledge, information. And so often I'm taken away by how many people don't have real knowledge of the industries they're in. I mean, you just think about the Christmas light industry. I can tell you right now that I can run laps around my competition when it comes to information, specifically about different things about diodes and LEDs and Kelvin temperatures and viewing angles and how transparent the lenses are. There's just so many things I could get into that knowledge base I have will consequently lead to me having guaranteed business. So I would always focus on those two things. Focus on understanding more about your products in the industry you're in. Be better than your competition. And by the way, you only have to be 10% better than them. Think about that for a minute. You only have to be a little bit better, really 1%. And then just work on your personality. Work on the personality that is a person that wants to do well in life, that wants to flourish and get yourself out of that situation.
So that kind of brings me to poor customer service can definitely be a pitfall for your business. And that can even start out of answering your phone. I know this can be a big struggle. I see it all the time. It doesn't matter how big the company is, but answering the phone can definitely be a struggle for people. And poor customer service is definitely one that can hinder us from growing our business. And the thing of it is I love it when people ask me because I'm a big guy of talking about the $8 to $12 a foot, and a lot of it comes down to customer service, right? And customer service is not just looking at answering the phone or talking to the customer. It's the before that, right? It's actually the marketing strategy of it, and are you giving the information that they need? And all of that information can help you and it can get you overcoming the poor customer service. What are some things that you do in your business to help keep customer service at top notch?
Well, it starts with the initial phone call, like the receptionist even, or the people answering the phones. I think Tommy Mello, if I'm not mistaken, he had talked about this before, and I know I've heard him speak about it before. But I think he incentivizes his receptionists. Like he gives them a performance payer, and they monitor their calls when they call in to just place an order, and that's not even the sales rep that they're going to be dealing with, but he literally incentivizes the receptionist the conversations to keep them positive and to keep people intrigued. I'm sure my staff hates it when I walk into a room and they're on the phone because I critique everything, not to be like micromanaging them, but I critique it from a perspective of, what could they have done differently? Because I'm big on the psychology of words and word choices. And because I grew up, on a farm, I have, double pronoun. I mean, I got double negatives coming out of my mouth, the left and right. My southern twang, everything else. You couldn't have a worse speech from a guy who, is trying to sell too, right? But at the same time, people don't care about my education or the way I articulate words. They care about how authentic and genuine and enthusiastic I am. And I feel like that is what we need to concentrate more on. So you can put a script in front of your receptionist or your salesperson or whoever it is that's answering the phone. And that script only goes so far. But you can imagine, and I've done this to my own staff, it's like if you answer the phone and say the script was, hello, thank you for calling Elf Pros. Or hello, thank you for calling Elf Pros. Then the enthusiasm determines how well that call is going to go. And you yourself, anyone listening to this, has made a phone call. And within the first 10 seconds of that phone call, you're like, I don't even want to do business with this company. I mean, listen to the woman on the other end or the man on the other end. They're rude, they're crude, they act like they don't even want to talk to me. And so I think it starts with that initial phone call or the initial communication. And then just keep that same, enthusiasm throughout the whole process. Whether it's email, text message, whatever it is, keep them excited. Again, I'm all about the experience. If you've heard me talking to Jason, I know you know where I'm going with this. It's like giving people the exceptional experience is what keeps me ahead of everyone else, is because I don't look at what I'm doing today. Because I can tell you right now, there's guys in here, there's guys on the group pages, there's guys that will steal as much information as they can, and that's all they're going to apply. They're not going to really work for it. But the reality is, the guy that's going to be successful, I don't care that you steal the information I'm sharing or I'm giving away, because I know I'm 2 steps ahead, because I'm thinking about next year and the year after and 10 years from now. And so as far as I'm concerned, because I'm not becoming complacent, I'm going to continue to be successful. I'm going to continue to critique the phone calls. I'm going to continue to look at the system that we have in place, the enthusiasm of the people that are working for me. And to be honest with you, sometimes you have to purge. We recently at our sign company got rid of 3 guys, and all 3 of them had been with me for years. But to be honest with you, their attitudes, they were just not the right fit. And one of them in particular, I don't think he saw it coming, but I named him out. With my management team, we sat down at the beginning of the year. I said, I want you guys on a piece of paper, tell me who has the worst attitudes here. And he showed up. And when I knew that we all had the same consensus of the same people, I'm like, well, then we're going to approach him. We're going to hold him accountable to his attitude. And if he can't handle it, he's out. And that's what happened. And so you really got to, as an owner, as someone that wants to scale and be successful, you've got to really look internally and do internal audits all the time and make sure that your enthusiasm is throughout the whole company. Keep them around.
Because if you got a crappy attitude, your employees are going to have a crappy attitude. Because it starts at the top and works its way down.
Absolutely.
Staying positive is not always easy either, especially when you're firing people. But you still got to be positive, and you have the reason of the attitude. And at that point, an attitude is like cancer. If you're not careful, it'll go through the whole company and it'll screw you. And it'll get into the customers and everything along the lines.
Yeah.
Buying is emotional speed of response is huge. Actually, I like Jeremy Olson put in here. I bought a deck staining business and immediately doubled the prices. Crazy how much money he left on the table. And I think this is, as you're able to make more money by raising your prices, and you can do a lot more stuff. You can offer better customer service. You can offer better marketing out there. You can offer a lot of different things that you can do, but when you're trying to go cheap because you think that's where you need to be at, let's hit on a little bit about what is this. I know this is kind of a loaded question, but what are some things, or what is the thing that how do we know what to come up with a price, how to price stuff?
Go to Jason Guyman's YouTube channel and just keep watching it until you figure it out. We're charging anywhere between $10 and $12 a foot for the average house. If it's a more difficult house, we're probably going to be closer to 12. If it's an easy house, we're going to be at 10. The reality is, when I got in this business, I really didn't go to the group page. I didn't really get a lot of information from others. I really wasn't worried about it. So I took the original advice that you gave me, and I took that as my basis to work off of. And then I'd figure it all out from there. But what I realized in my area, specifically in the Virginia area, there's guys from $3 a foot to $12 a foot. So, and I would say the average is probably between 5 and 6. That's probably the average in my area. And I have a lot of competition. And there are 3 main companies that I would say are real competitors. Really only 2, but 3 specifically that I would say within a 50-mile radius of me. And every one of them are $10 to $12.
Right.
And the reason we can charge those prices is because of what we're delivering. There is definitely things that we're doing different in our delivery, our approach, our customer service. The whole experience is much different. And it's hard to compare. These guys who are complaining, saying you can't get that in my area, I would just tell you that. And by the way, I think it was Jamie. Is that his name? The one that said he was in the hood or ghetto or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every area of the United States will allow for a seasonal business such as Christmas lights to be successful. But there are very few places where it won't be successful. But just like a car dealership or certain types of retailers, like franchises, won't allow businesses in certain areas, there's reasons for that. So you really have to determine if opening a business in the area that you're opening it up in makes sense, because it is a premium service that you're delivering, and you might not have the clientele there. But these guys that are saying, well, I'm in such and such Texas, and everybody in my area only charges $3 or $4 a foot, you can't get $10 a foot. I would differ on that, because I would say that you most likely aren't doing what I'm doing. And if you were, I would easily come to that area and charge $10 a foot. As a matter of fact, in the sign business, I'm in an 8th percentile of companies, and we are on the high end of everything we do, and we're shipping signs all over the country. And really, price isn't an issue because people know what kind of certifications, what we're delivering, what we're doing. And so the type of sign company we are is very rare in the type of niche market we're in.
So there's 2 more, but one of them is inefficient operations. This is a killer in businesses that obviously they don't know. Well, I guess they don't know what they don't know, right? And they do the same thing. They do insanity, right? They keep doing the same thing over and over and over and wanting a different result. And so with this, and a lot of it is disorganized, right? They're not organized. They don't have a process. When they do try to scale, when they do try to do stuff, that is something that we have to look at of why we are struggling with these things. And I know you guys have, thanks for the stream. I can't not hear. I will put this back up. I know it's recording on my side, and I have very little audio issues, so I don't know what the deal is with it. But I will also redo it, put it up in a different video after this. So if you want to check out the replay, I will put up a better audio one. So with that, what are some things that are inefficient operations or ways that we can keep that from happening?
Sorry, I was looking at my microphone. I think everything's good on my end. I haven't had any problems with this in the past, but not sure. I'm sorry. What was your question, Jason?
So, what is inaccurate in or the operations when we have failure in our operations? What are some things we can do to overcome that?
Well, first off, a failure is when it happens twice, right? Um, I think the one thing that I have to remember is just because I'm good at something doesn't mean I'm always going to be good at it. And it's good to reflect probably quarterly on what you're not doing well. And so for me, I always want to be in elite status as much as possible on every level. So I want to look at everything from you specifically think about the phone ringing. Are you answering the phone calls? I know Google puts out a report. I'm sure most of you get it, that how many missed calls you had or how many were answered, and things like that. That's good information, that you can work off of. The other thing is, if you aren't able to take the phone call, what is the voicemail? What kind of voicemail do you have in place, and what's your follow up process? Because if you're not following up, and then again, what about the phone calls you are taking? What's your turnaround? What's your system that you have in place to make sure that you're turning around that quote in X amount of time? I see a lot of guys, and this would be interesting to ask someone like Ashley, who's in the business of advertising. But I'd be interested in knowing, with the information that she gets back from her customers, because how many of them is she running ads for, and then they're getting positive feedback as far as like people are hitting the ads, people are sending their information, but and then maybe they make that initial phone call or initial contact, but then they're not closing the jobs. But what's their follow up process? Because I've seen this time and time again where guys don't have a good follow up process or system in place to make sure they're successful. If people aren't going to use my companies, I want it to be because they simply don't understand what we're doing is something they need. I did, and then I have to examine myself. Did I not educate them properly? Was my process not good the way I communicated to them? But I think so often it starts with, we don't even have a follow up process. We don't even have a timeline for how quickly we turn around the next communication. And so those are the things I would start examining, because those are usually where people are failing.
And one way to do this is start writing out your customer journey. When you're talking to them, what's the plan? What if you don't get a hold of them? When's that email going out? And don't try to do it all at once, because you're not going to get it when you try to, when you try to knock this tree down over it by doing it really hard, you're probably not going to get it done, right? And that's the problem with trying to do too much of it. So, start taking baby bites, right? How do you eat an elephant? You don't eat it all at one time. You eat it bite by bite.
Yeah. I'll talk more into this, Mike. I saw someone had Rich. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'll try to do that. I think a setting must have gotten changed on my mic, and so it's causing you to have to be up on it. So sorry about that, guys.
Rich was at one of our classes.
Yeah. Daniel, I would love to meet you. I know you're somewhere in Virginia, right? Or Maryland?
No, he's right by you.
Okay. I knew he was somewhere. So if you ever want to hook up with me, just hit me up. Send me a private message, and we'll connect.
So, so the last thing is I want to hit on what I know one of the things that you've done, and I know you've invested in a lot in yourself. When you first started investing in yourself, what was the reason behind it, and did you think it was a waste of money, or how has it helped you over the years?
Well, it's continuing to help me. I mean, this is still a ride I'm on. I just got back from Arizona last month, so I go to Arizona about every 2 months just to be surround it with some other business owners. I'm part of a couple groups, but specifically the one group I'm part of has been a huge motivation for me and my business journey. I guess you could say in some ways I became complacent, right? I had hit the goals that I had uh, uh, projected for myself in life and business, and when I succeeded in a way, I don't know that I was any less motivated, but I didn't know what to do next. Like in other words, okay, I hit these numbers in my personal life and in my business life, and I felt, wow, I did it. So I can just repeat it. And I did. I repeated it. And I did it again. And I repeated it. I'm like, that's nice. I can do this over and over and over again. But then I thought to myself, what is it different about this guy who is running $100 million company and never shows up to work at all? And how come he's able to do that and I'm not able to do that? And when I started speaking to and engaging with guys that were the next level of success than I was, I realized that they were getting coached themselves. And I was like, wait a minute, you're not the coach? Like I thought you were the coach. They were like, no, I'm part of this investment group. I'm part of this business group. I'm part of this motivational group, this mindset group. And I realized these guys were investing in themselves for the next level. And then I use Tom Brady a lot. I'm not even a Tom Brady fan, but I am a fan of what he accomplished and what he was able to do in his later years. Because if you think about it, he 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 was a great quarterback early on, but he became, what people would consider the best, the greatest of all time later in his career. And that was because he kept, you know, pushing harder to invest more into his self. He wanted to be better and fine tuning everything about himself, even in his diet and everything about himself. So he lived and breathed this different version of himself 20 years into the NFL than he did when he first got into the NFL. And so I think for anyone that really wants to be super successful and allow yourself the best opportunity for your family and to leave a legacy and to leave something to your kids if something were to happen to you, you need to push even harder to that next level. And there's no better way to do that than to keep investing in yourself and get into the next level group or education or training that's out there. And so that's what I've done. And in every regard, in every business and in every industry, I'm doing that. But I'm also doing it just on a personal level, just so I can be the best version of Paul Gardner, or I can be the best father, I can be the best husband. And so that's a goal of mine. Before I got on the phone with you, I was outside pitching baseball with my kids, and I just love those moments. And I'll be honest with you, if any of you have heard my story, my oldest now is 21 years old, and I just spoke to him about an hour and a half ago, and he's at camp all summer. He chose to work at a Christian camp all summer. He's not getting paid, and I'm excited for what he's doing. But I've shared this before. You'll spend 90% of the hours with your children from birth to 18, and most of us work ourselves to death. And when those statistics started hitting me, and I started getting into these groups where guys were spending 50 and 60 hours a week with their children, and I'm spending like 2 or 3, that's what I wanted. I wanted the freedom. And if we all look closely at ourselves, we would realize freedom's much more important than the financial side of it. But you got to have the financial side of it in order to have the freedom. So you got to look at it very closely into what you're doing daily, your habits, and what better way to change those habits than get yourself in a room of power players, real successful people. I mean, the group I'm in, I'm probably the weakest link. I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, they would probably tell you something different, but when I'm in that room, I am in awe because these guys are very successful. I mean, there's a lot of billionaires in the group I'm part of, and I would never have put myself in those, you know, arenas, or I would never been in those rooms had I not continued to invest in myself and I promoted myself to the next level. And then people introduced me to these groups. So I would just say keep investing in yourself, just like if you were to invest in your body and trying to be fit and healthy. You got to go to the gym, and eventually you're going to promote yourself to that next level and what you have to do. And you need to do the same thing for your brain and for your mind and for your thoughts and for the systems you're putting in place for your business. So that's what I do. That's what I'm continuing to do. I'll probably do that for another 20 years at least, because I don't see myself quitting anytime soon.
So, when you first started doing it, what was did you like, was this something that you were like, hey, I'm going to start doing this right out of the get go? Or was it something that someone that took a little bit to spark that spark for you?
Well, for me, um, I remember getting introduced to different groups and thinking about investing in myself. Now, for years prior to me investing in me personally, and when I say investing in myself, I'm talking about on a personal level, not even on the business level. And I realized I had some limiting beliefs. And years prior to that, I was always doing industry training, right? Like I would go get specific training in my industry, but I never did any real advanced training because it cost more money. And I was like, who's going to pay, $10,000 to do that? And of course, Jason, you know how much money I've spent. I've spent well over that. But what I kept, there were, and don't get me wrong, there are definitely some programs out there that probably are not worth your time or my time, and you need to be careful. I would vet them out through referrals. I would find out guys that are successful and ask them where did you get this type of training, and that's what I did. But for years, I was being sold ideas of, hey, you need to join this group, and so I was like, I'm not paying to be part of a group. I'm not paying for someone to tell me I have limiting beliefs. But then when I really dug deep, I realized, and I read books, I was like, I do have limiting beliefs. There's a lot of things I'm not thinking clearly on. And even though I was successful in my own circles, I realized too that I wasn't the level of success I really wanted and I felt like I could achieve. So I had to pull myself out of that environment. And so I started asking the level of people that I want to be like, where should I go next? What should I do? And, it wasn't just like they gave me a playbook. They would just give me little bits and pieces at a time. And then I got around other guys like them, more guys like them. And then I found out about other opportunities and other, groups and other trainings. And that's what led me down the journey I'm on now I got in the circle I never imagined being in. And I could tell you, even like with some of the circles I'm in, it's not even like about a celebrity status or anything, but it really is like I'm in rooms all the time with heavy hitters, people that a lot of guys on here, look up to or have heard of. And you get in those rooms and it's just like you're sitting at a table with these guys, dining with them. And then if you just get to dine with some of these guys for an hour and you hear some of the things they're spilling out, it's I don't know how to say it any different. It changes your life literally just in a few words. And it might just be something you pick up on and no one else at the table picks up on. But because we all come from different walks of life, being in those rooms as often as possible is what I try to do.
So, before we hit on the last thing, because you hit on something that I want to hit on a little bit more, because I think a lot of times self limiting beliefs and fear can be our business growth killer out of anything. So, with that, what are some things that I know?
I'm
One of
reading
the
these comments. I'm just laughing. Sorry.
oh, I see you
I
there.
don't get to read them while I'm talking, but there's some of them are funny.
So one of the things that I love that you talk about, and you've told me about it too when we were talking, is one of the books that you read 2 or 3 times a year, and it's an old book written in 1937. Um, this book right here, right? Think and Grow Rich. And this is one of those books that I know people that read it every day. I've heard people that say read it every day. What are your thoughts on, or how can that help you to change your mindset?
So it was really hard for me to really rationalize with this thought, but this is really something you have to think about. Everything has to happen in the non physical before it happens in the physical. Now it gets complicated when you just like, what? What is he talking about? But it's really not that complicated. But every action you take, you think about it before you do it. Now, some of it's natural, right? Some of it's an instinct at this point. But the reality is, one of the biggest flaws that every business owner has is taking the action, right? Everyone that's in our circles now in the Christmas light industry wants to be successful. So they've already thought about it in the non-physical. And maybe they've even put numbers on it. Maybe they've like, this year I want to do $100,000 in business. Next year I want to do 200,000. This year I want to get 50 clients. I want to do 50 homes. We all think about it in the non-physical. But the physical reality, which is what we want to come to a reality, is something that has to take action. So with everything in the non-physical, you can't just write it down, but you have to really meditate on it and think about it in the physical. And I use this illustration in some of my trainings, but if you take a lemon and you consider, and I'm going to use this illustration just for purposes of people to see what I'm really talking about. If I were to take a lemon and I were to cut it right now in front of you, and I were to hand it to you and tell you to squeeze it, and then I want you to drip it on your tongue, everybody's tongue starts to water right away. So something went from the non-physical, the thought of doing that, and then to the physical. And the fact is, we don't allow the physical to happen often enough. And so I, in reality, would dream about certain events, things I want to happen in my life. And of course, the dream was happening over and over again. I would think about it. I was like, I want this, but it wasn't happening. And so, although and I agree with, everything that Napoleon Hill is saying, but I think the reality is there is the action steps, right? There is the action steps that have to take place. So one of the things that you can do is start thinking more specifically in the non-physical. So for example, if your goal is to do 50 homes this season, okay, and some of you that might be a low number, but I'm just trying to use this from a perspective of giving everybody an opportunity to see it from my perspective. But if you want to hit 50, you have to start now thinking, okay, how do I get 50? Well, I can write down how that's obtainable, but I want to imagine it over and over again that tomorrow I'm going to get 5 homes. Tomorrow I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to call the people that last year got estimates from me. I'm going to see if they're interested. And you start thinking of all these non-physical ways of making things happen in the physical, and then start acting on them. And when you start acting on things that you think of in the non-physical and taking those action steps, you get traction. And when you get traction, things starts happening. Opportunities open up. And then next thing you know, the floodgates open up. So it's a whole different way of thinking when you can actually start thinking of things in the non-physical and really dream them up in your idea of what can happen, but also thinking about how the action's taking place before it takes place. So actually think about physically taking the action. Tom Brady, I know some guys don't like him, obviously they vented on here, but I heard him describing his throwing motion and things that he would do, and he was thinking about it. He was literally non-physically thinking about things that he needed to change. And so he started incorporating the idea of the mechanics of changing it before he physically went into the gym or went onto the field and changed it. And some of those things that we take for granted, that our brains, our thought process can lead us to such success before we even, have put it into the physical form. We just need to think about it first. And the reality is we can lay it all out, map it all out. We can systematize it. We can put processes in place and actually take action on it.
So
I feel like I'm going deep on layman's terms, but there is a whole method on how to make that happen. But that's the reality of how I think now.
And you get into that process of thinking that way, right? And when you get in that process, and then you get into a room with very successful people where you are the low man of that room. You only got one way to go and go up. And it also probably helps you to see how they start seeing things, so that way you can start seeing through your eyes of how they're doing it, so that way you can be successful also.
Yeah. And action is so important in everything we do. That's why I have this guy right here, Milton Friedman, behind me, because I I want to every time I walk out of my office, he's a reminder to me. And if you don't know who Milton Friedman is, he was an economist back in the 70s and 80s, and he he understood. As a matter of fact, the quote that's below there says, "There's no such thing as a free lunch." Because the reality is, the only way any of this is going to become a reality is to take the action. But you have to think about it first, then you take the action. So if I was going to write another book as great as Napoleon Hill, it would be think, take action, and grow rich. So you have to think about it up here first. And you have to take the action.
Yep. When Jason got a hold of me 4 years ago, I was in a job, barely making it. I have two successful companies, and now I'm buying a triplex investment property. His teachings work. Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right, so I want to hit on one last thing of training. And if you are, I know I've kind of done this to the pressure washing and Christmas light one, but this is going to be more for the Christmas light one. If you want to grow your Christmas lights and you want to learn more from like people like Paul is going to be a teacher there. Another amazing teacher is Ryan Lee. Another amazing teacher that's going to be there is Dustin Howe. Dustin Ryan Lee had a very successful landscape lighting business, and he is all about how to grow a business. He did do Christmas lights too. Dustin House, he has about 6 or 7 successful business doing multi-million dollars in each business. So he will be there also speaking. We're actually going to be at his shop, so you'll be able to actually see how they run. I don't even know how many trucks they run, but they run a lot. But he's going to be there. And so you can go check out christmaslights.io/a and find more information about it. What's your thoughts on this here, Paul?
Oh, I'm excited. And Rich, I'll never forget you. By the way, you did sit right beside me. I don't even think you intentionally did that, but it happened. Um, I, as much as I'm excited myself to be there and surrounded with you guys and some of the other trainers, I'm as much excited to meet others, even guys who haven't been doing this a long time. And I think it goes without saying, Jason, based on your conversations with me in the past and other trainings we've been to together, you will gain more knowledge outside of the training, just networking, than you will within the training, and some of the relationships that you'll build. And I would love to sit here and tell you that I thought of everything when it came to how to be the most successful person in the room. But the reality is, a bulk of that came from just guys who showed up at a training to be trained by me or trained by Jason. And so it's it's something that we take for granted, that if you go to a training like this, don't get consumed with the training aspect of it. And although that's going to be great. And by the way, if you haven't heard Ryan Lee, as I mentioned the other day when I just posted something, it's like if you're there 10 minutes to hear Ryan Lee, it's worth the investment. And then obviously you guys all know Jason, but and Chris Johnson, if you haven't heard him speak, yeah, that guy's on fire. And he's on fire in person too. And then Dustin Howe. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to be around Dustin. I've been, around his guys. I've been around his business. I've been, at his facility. He has a fabulous facility. And he thinks about everything. Like he's an engineer, really, when it comes down to it, because he thinks of everything. So if it's the systems he puts in place that work so well for doing thousands of homes, or if it's the type of connection, or the type of clips, or the type of lights, or the removing devices. I mean, he's come up with a lot of things himself that he probably doesn't get enough credit for, that a lot of you guys wouldn't even recognize him for. But he is just a rock star in so many ways, and he's so quiet and meek that most people probably don't know who Dustin is. And then of course there's others that are going to be there that are worth the time. But I think, and I don't know all the guys that are coming, but I can guarantee you that, I know I saw Dan's coming. I can't wait to meet Dan. And Dan has actually been part of my coaching program, but I'll just say this: take a few minutes. Dan's a quiet guy. He's a big guy, so he's not he's easy to find. But the reality is he's very quiet. But the fact is too, he's very successful in his own right, and he's just getting started. And you could probably sit down with 10 minutes with someone like Dan and learn a lot. And when you hear what he's charging and what he's getting on his average jobs, even in his power washing business, he's killing it. And he's already done, so well and on so many levels, he doesn't give himself enough credit. But the reality is, between him and his wife, they're a power team, and they work really hard, and they go out of their way to give their customers an exceptional experience. And if you get around enough people like that, and it's not just me and Jason, there's going to be other people there. You will. It's just like creating good habits, right? You put yourself in a room of people that have good habits, you're going to be less likely to have, to give up those bad habits. And I would just recommend that if anyone's on the fence about it, this is a great opportunity to be in that room with so many successful people and people that are like-minded and who want to achieve this type of success that we all desire to have. And so I would be happy to get on a phone call with anyone. If you want to send me a direct message or anything on Facebook, if you're on the fence about it. But I can tell you 1,500, 2,000, 2,400, whatever it is. I don't even know. I know there's different price tiers, but whatever it is, that's a deal. That's a deal. And if you guys knew how much I was spending for the type of trainings I go to, you would think that is quite the deal. So get signed up. I'd love to meet every one of you if I could. So I look forward to being there. I'm excited myself. Utah is great. And then we're also having the training at Dustin Howe's distribution center, which his facility there is it's awesome. It's really good, well organized.
Thank you, Artie, for the super chat. I agree 100% what Paul said. I always say, if I can 10x whatever my investment is, I am happy with it. And I will say, you will more than 10x your stuff. If you take half of what you learn for the weekend and take action and put it into action, I will guarantee you will more than 10x it. You will probably 100x it, to be honest, because you will learn things that you would never even think about. That's the thing about Dustin is, and I'm like Paul, Dustin is one that he's kind of like, nobody knows about him much, right? Because he's not very open and flashy and all of that at all. He's a very quiet guy, but he has a wealth of information. One of the things about Dustin is he makes sure that he has the best customer service out there. And it doesn't matter if it's his Christmas light business or you buying lights from him. You will get the best customer service from him, guaranteed. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So with that, you can go check out christmaslights.io/A. If that doesn't get you there, you can go to Christmas Lights, go to the in-person. It'll take you to the Utah one, but this should take you there to it. Before we jump off here, Paul, what are some words of wisdom that you would give to the people still listening here?
Take action, be intentional, and do the opposite of what your competition's doing. In all seriousness, I think that's some of the things that I try to do all the time. I try to make sure that I'm taking the action steps necessary to be successful. I also think, we have to be intentional, right? We have to look at something specifically and say, this is what I'm going to need to do to accomplish this. And this is why I'm doing this. And your why is big. I mean, if you really want that type of freedom that we all, probably desired when we decided to run our own businesses, then you're going to have to put these action steps in place, and you have to be very intentional about it. Just like with my family, I intentionally go out of my way to spend time with them. You can't change your kids' memories. You can't change your kids' memories. So I want it to be a good one. And so when I realized I wasn't the father or the husband I could have been, 15 years ago, that's when I became more intentional about the time I spent with them. And it's the same thing within your business. You have to be intentional. And then don't look at everyone around you and mimic what they're doing, because then you have competition. I don't really have competition where I am. If anything, I would say I set the bar for everybody around me. And then I know the next year they're going to follow me, and a lot of them are going to wisen up and they're going to start doing what I'm doing. So now I have to switch gears. And I can tell you this coming season, I've already got 20 different things we're doing different. So don't ask me what I did last year, because most of it's not the same. So let's work on next year and just keep doing that. I mean, that's what's worked for me. I am by far, the smartest guy in the room. But I will say I'm always looking to advance my knowledge and understanding of how to be the most successful guy. And so because of that, I feel like I always gain traction. I run into opportunities, and as those opportunities develop, my brain develops. My thinking cap develops. You guys can probably hear it in the way I talk. I'm not a guy that graduated from an Ivy League school. I had a guy that was working for me from Harvard University. That's what Elon Musk says too, right? People, I didn't go to an Ivy League school, but the guys that work for me did.
He went to Pensacola. There's not a whole lot down
I went
there.
to Pensacola Christian College, and I actually went there for criminal justice. So if it gives you any idea of where I am now, I don't know. I worked in corrections for a while, and I literally hated it. So, hated it.
Awesome, Paul. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I hope we can all see each other in Utah in about 2 weeks. Go check it out, christmaslights.io/A. Other than that, I hope you all have a great week, and we will see you all later. But you hang on, Paul.